everybody, and welcome to this panel session. We're getting close to the end of the event, and we have now a very eminent panel with whom to discuss the future of payments. And I would like to invite Sam Tanskul, Managing Director of Krungsri Bank, for head of innovation and customer. I would like to invite Yarbrough, VP Asia of Rapyd, Gaurav Zutshi, head of digital channel of APAC of JP Morgan, and Hemant Baijal, an economist, senior payment, and a consultant at the World Bank. I would be grateful if you could switch the cameras on and join me on stage. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I would like to start with a question to Joel. Given also your background with your career history, why do you think that SuperApps have been emerging out of the Asia landscape instead of other regions in the world?
I think it's a good question. It is something that at Rapyd we hear a lot about, particularly as partners want to come into the region and be very relevant in the region. There's a few things that are very different about particularly the Southeast Asia market, but APAC in general. One is the pace at which the customer base has gone mobile. The number of mobile devices people have, the speed of mobile broadband tends to be very, very good. And for a lot of people, they really don't have access to a primary computer in their home, right? So mobile really is the dominant way that they interact, which means that they are a little bit sensitive to bandwidth. They're a little bit sensitive to apps being updated and things like that. And it really created a positive environment for ecosystem apps to have more and more share of what's happening on their phone on a regular basis. Whether that is the very famous stories with WeChat, Alipay, Meituan in China, or with Gojek and Grab, et cetera, in Southeast Asia, that one app becomes a very significant part of their daily life. And it becomes very easy to add incremental services to that app. And then if you're looking for margin, of course, putting yourself into the payment flow and the credit flow become great ways to help ecosystem-based transactions to prosper. And that collectively is what we consider a super app, right? One which marries together commerce transactions and payments into one rich ecosystem that people are in and out of multiple times every day.
Thank you, Joel. Kunsam, talking about super apps, Thailand has rolled out real-time payments, developed its own payment solution, PromptPay, that is somehow positioning in that direction, at the same time reduce interchange and so on. How have banks have been able to capitalize on something that, while has lowered the cost of payment for the user, would appear to have diluted the revenues for the banks?
So I would say the real-time payment in Thailand definitely diluting the revenue for the banks, but it has a big impact to the Thai people who can transfer the money or remit the money in real time with no cost. I mean, it's really no cost on that one. The PromptPay has been initiated, I think, about 3 years ago by using the mobile number or national ID to remit. However, there is still some restrictions that not over than 5,000 baht. If over than 5,000 baht, still have some fee to charge. Then, and in 17th of March 2018, which I could believe 2 years ago, 2 years back, then one big bank, SCB, Siam Commercial Bank, has announced that they're going to have the free remittance. Whatever you transfers, how much, even the amount of transfers, using the bank account number, then it will be free of charge. Then, in a week after, all the banks joining this same campaign. So I think I would say there's kind of FOMO, fear of missing out. So all the bank becomes doing a free of charge of remittance. The good thing is that I think now Thai people enjoying remittance, the amount through the mobile banking with free of charge. And as well as if you come to Thailand right now, I think 60-70% of the small merchants right now are accepting the QR payment, the prompt pay payment, similar to China. But we still have second choice of paying cash or cards. But mostly right now, you can ask the shop to use this one because we can pay for free of charge. Coming to the banks where I'm standing here, it's still hard to get and capitalize those income yet. Due what we thought that okay, if we accept more on real-time payment, more on QR payment, we would get more data. What it means that we're going to use the information-based lending similar to Alipay. However, we still need times on that one. Most of the shop doesn't accept the QR payment for 100%. It depends on the customer. It's not forced like in China that everyone paying on QR payment. So I think it takes a couple of years for the bank to capitalize on this, and even we can make money on this one. This is from Thailand.
Thank you. Gaurav, SuperApp and conversational commerce is somehow creating a converged interface where consumers are contextually concentrating a lot of activities, and the actual payment solution disappears in the background. Often, the founding source, a card or a link to an account, disappears in the background as a founding source for a wallet or an interface. Is this pushing banks and payment companies to be disintermediated from their customers? What do you see from your perspective?
Thank you, Francesco. What we see is these super apps, like I said, they have high engagement compared to bank apps. Like people can go to a bank app maybe once a day to look at their balance, few times a month to make transfers or bill payments. But in super apps, the community is very engaged, the ecosystem is very entrenched, and you have multiple use cases for which client comes to you. So obviously the reason that becomes the top of your wallet card, it becomes the top of your wallet payment method or your value exchange. So I do not believe that the super apps are disintermediating banks or payment companies. Many of them are partnering. Like if you look at in India, all of these super apps, whether it's Paytm or PhonePe by Walmart, they are all partnering with banks, and banks are sponsoring them into the real-time payment, the UPI platform, by giving them a handle or a VPA, virtual private account, which they use them for the clearing and settlement and as their the escrow account for the scheme. So they do need the bank and the payment company. I think it's a bit symbiotic. Like I said, payment companies and payment businesses are scale businesses, and these super apps are able to aggregate scale and bring them to them through a single interface. And it's, I think, a win-win for both. So I've been hearing for the last 5 years that Fintech will bring the WhatsApp moment, what happened to telco, that the voice and data and VAS, all revenue was killed. ARPU went from $50 to $0. Now people use only a mobile SIM card for an identity. That means once you install an app, one-time password comes to the phone. That's it. After that, your phone can be on a Wi-Fi mode only. You don't consume any telco service. So that hasn't happened in banking because of the compliance, AML, KYC, GFCC, the regulations in the markets. Banks and payment companies are still a very strong partner for these fintechs and super apps to work together in partnership.
Yeah, thank you. Talking about fintechs, there's a lot of new entrants coming to the market. Hemant, this is creating any additional risk? Is there anything that regulators, from your perspective, should be mindful of? And if so, any provisions that they should take?
Yeah, look, thank you, Francesco. So the opportunity side, first of all, is huge. In many country environments where financial access still an issue. Regulators are seeing this as an opportunity for providing higher financial access, especially in Southeast Asia, as we just heard from Joel and Sam. But yes, there are risks because a lot purely from a financial regulator's perspective, a lot of these big tech or companies or fintechs who are getting into the space are not directly supervised or regulated by the financial regulator, unless you, of course, have a arrangement, something what Gaurav just mentioned, where it's a partnership where the bank is, behind, and the financial institution, a regulated financial institution, is managing the risk in that particular ecosystem. So the issue then becomes, is there like 3 or 4 different types of risks that regulators would typically be concerned about. One is really the protection of consumer funds. What happens if it's like a pre-funded wallet? What happens if consumer has issues with it? What's the recourse mechanism? And even in a transactional sense, what are the chargeback mechanisms and so on and so forth? So that would be something a regulator would be concerned about from a risk standpoint. And then also a lot of these apps are enabling e-commerce. Basically providing some sort of an intermediary service, as a non-bank institution, financial institution, interacting with the financial institution. So the typical risks that sort of go into this space are the credit liquidity risk that may arise if the intermediary responsible for collecting funds on behalf of the merchant, they fail to transfer funds. It can cause a bit of a ripple effect. Now, of course, I'm just talking in general terms, but if you start to aggregate these, then a financial regulator sort of gets a little worried about it. Operational reputational risks are also possible that may arise due to operational security disruptions, and lastly, the cyber risks can also be, especially when you're dealing with financial accounts. Any sort of cyber risk is a big concern. There's also a talk in these circles about especially in Europe and countries that deal with the whole data privacy GDPR, consumers facing privacy and data protection risks. If there is some sort of a cyber breach, what happens then? So I'll stop there. But these are the type of risks that a regulator is typically concerned about.
Thank you. Gaurav, real-time payments is now a sweeping wave of innovation globally, where
So I got the gist of the question. It was like real-time payments are the innovation around the world. And do we have
everybody
Francesco
disappear
back?
from my screen? Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You were asking about
okay,
real-time
Gaurav,
payments, right?
Are you still there? You disappeared with the camera feed is gone.
No problem. I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hello?
I guess we may have some connectivity issue. Well, in the meantime, Sam, I'm
All right, Gaurav, let's go with real-time payments.
Yeah. So real-time payments, as of a recent report I read, the FIS report, it said 56 countries are either going to launch it in the next 12 months or already on their way to launch. And I think real-time payments are becoming pretty table stakes now in most lines of payment business.
Hello?
Because what I believe is that there are a lot of new business models which are developing around real-time payments. So one is specifically around
we may
third-party.
have some technical connectivity issues here.
We can hear you, Francesco. Can you hear me? Yeah. So the new business models are appearing around money movement, right? There are like a whole new category of third-party payment providers, the TP3s, and the only product that they have is the movement of liquidity from point A to point B, whether it's P2P, P2M, B2B, B2B to C. So all those can be expedited, and like in normal economic terms, you talk about velocity of inventory turnover. So I believe there is a metric called velocity of liquidity turnover or liquidity movement.
So apparently
and that can be
there's something wrong with my
monetized.
interface. So the question was for Gaurav. We started talking about real-time payments that are used for a variety of cases. One of the key questions that has been coming up over and over again whenever real-time have been forced into a market by the regulator is about the user case for the banks. This is a very costly innovation, and it takes quite a little bit of effort to roll it out. So the question rising typically from the market is about the business case and the user cases. Where do you see the better applicability of real time? Is it a retail, B2B? Is it domestic or international payments? What's your perspective?
Thank you, Francesco. So I believe real-time payments are going. Can you hear me now, Francesco? Okay, maybe the audience are able to hear. So I'll respond to your question. So I believe real-time payments should definitely have an urgent payment need associated with it. So most use cases are talking about, payroll payments or gig economy, people getting paid instantly, and that's why they have money in their account, and they also get a confirmation that the money is there. So there is all about speed of payment as well as the information of payment delivery. So the new business cases which we are seeing are around request to pay, where insurance company can request a premium payment. A customer can file a claim and expect a claim being disbursed quickly because he has a need associated with that, the claim amount. We have been talking about, travel and tourism companies where an airline would want to give an urgent. Can you hear me? Okay. So I believe that there has to be either a C at the end or a customer often corporate, either a B2B to C or a B2C. So a big B, I don't think real time is that critical, but I can defer it to the other panelists for their comments.
Yeah, I would say, Gaurav, I think you're 100% right. And then let me connect it back to one of the things that Sam said, which is almost that real-time payments is a market expansion maneuver, right? We're talking about eliminating cash, we're breaking down payments into smaller atoms, we're moving the payments much more frequently. So in reality, the total number of transactions is increasing dramatically. And at the same time, we're reducing the cost of working capital and reducing the need for credit, because the money is actually moving much more quickly, more liquidly in the economy, right? So from my perspective, and the perspective of Rapyd, right, we're trying to embrace RTP systems everywhere around the world, and whether we're facilitating them domestically or plugging them into a cross-border rail, the money just keeps moving faster and faster, and it's reducing the cost in almost every way for the merchants that we work with. So from our perspective, it's very exciting.
So Hemant, do you believe there is any extra cost of compliance around regulations around real-time payments, and when do you see real-time cross-border will become a reality?
Well, that's actually the next sort of the holy grail, if you will, and CPMI, the Committee for Payments and Market Infrastructures, have just recently released a bunch of reports earlier this year, where they talk about harmonization of rules and regulations between across countries, and also there's a good deal of coverage on harmonization data frameworks, especially, and also the API messaging standards, which will allow development of multilateral platforms. I think this straight-through processing is quite important in these contexts. A lot of the fintechs and the new types of providers are not currently directly participating in a national payment system, and by that I mean infrastructure like the real-time gold settlement or the back-end clearing and settlement. So as you mentioned, the India case, they have to go through a financial institution. That's not really straight-through processing. That's really adding to the layers and compliance. So from that aspect, yes, there is a lot of emphasis and focus on integration of domestic as well as regional payment infrastructures. And with that, obviously, the compliance piece is important, right? I mean, so you have to go through
Hemant, you've gone on mute.
maybe the connection is bad. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, maybe the compliance folks put you on mute. Yeah. So I can ask Sam another question. So I'm saying, when you talk about cross-border real-time payments, Sam, do you think it will be a bilateral play or it will be multilateral? I've been in ASEAN for 20 years, and I've been hearing about ASEAN Pay becoming like a multi-country corridor, and it started originally from the ATM switches, NETs and MEPs and ITMX and Arthajasa talking to each other to say that we will create an interoperable payment network using the ATM rails. But on the fast rails like PromptPay, Do It Now, Pay Now, do you think there will be interoperability soon? Sam, can you hear me? I think we're facing a problem. Joel, you wanted to answer that question about
yeah, for sure. I mean,
real time?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my prediction, and you're ahead of me in terms of being in the region, my prediction was to be a collection of bilaterals, right? I think it's more practical and easier to negotiate bilateral settlements, right? Is it the right system? Maybe not. But it can go a lot faster, and then you can really prove the use case, right? And then from there, generalize to a larger system. I mean, even when Hemant mentioned, a book drop of analytics studies, to me that, I'm sure the contents are right, but the question is, what's the implementation lifecycle? And I think bilaterals are probably a little bit faster. That said, do they have the impact that you're looking for, right? I think, if you look at the MAS, right, they've announced partnerships between, I guess, Pay Now and PromptPay, and Nets has announced something with NPCI on the RuPay side, and there's a whole selection of these kind of bilateral things. Do they add up to quite enough yet? I would say maybe not yet, but the business case for real-time payments is so strong and so exciting that I do think we will see them accelerate dramatically. And then people like ourselves that are infrastructure providers, we hope to sit in the middle and fill in the cracks where those bilaterals aren't sufficient enough to unlock all the use cases that are possible. But ultimately, I think the standards will adopt and provide effectively multilateral on the back of a bunch of bilateral relationships.
No, I think that's fair. But the only challenge in that is, how do you make these bilaterals discoverable? How do you create an acceptance mark or visibility? But maybe because of apps, and you can have, app having reciprocal rights on each other's acceptance marks. So maybe it's much easier. But in the past, I've seen like when you create these bespoke bilaterals, it's very difficult for people to know where exactly can that bilat work, and service discoverability is a bit difficult. But I think mobile can bridge that gap. Awesome. So Hemant, from World Bank side, what are you seeing, especially around the models like, NPCI is being asked. Now they have created an NPCI International. They are expanding globally to take that low-cost UPI infrastructure and taking it to emerging markets. Are you playing facilitator, or are you helping such initiatives where innovations in certain markets can be cross-pollinated and given to multiple markets at a low cost with a proven business model and a technology stack?
I don't think World Bank would take any, would push for any commercial initiative to be shipped to, a different country. I think that's purely a commercial sort of a deal. But in concept, yes, what I said earlier about allowing technologies or even evolution of multilateral platforms, whether it's for remittances, for other types of, or even domestic services. Yes, there's a lot of emphasis, on that. And I think one other thing I wanted to mention, this is something which is so, in a general sense, around the world, whether it's real-time payments or things like SuperApps, I don't think there is a agreed upon framework, especially in the cross-border sense. And regulators are still learning quite a bit, because obviously there's an opportunity that everybody sees here, in terms of whether it's financial access or efficiency or whatever it may be. So a number of approaches are being tried, and of course, you guys living in Singapore, the Singapore Monetary Authority's sandbox is probably one of the first ones that was in place. So a lot of countries are trying that sandbox approach, sort of see what's a good balance between regulation and innovation. So that's also something I wanted to put out there as a new development. And I think, from what my understanding is, there are at least 40, 50 new markets, including very small markets, whether they are like in Africa or in the Balkans or in Latin America. They're all looking at instant payments or real-time payments as the next sort of a thing that allows like the strengthening and deepening of retail payment infrastructure ecosystems. So let me stop there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what else can we talk about? We have real time, we have SuperApps, we have. What's your view, Joel, on the next generation? Machines to machine, like IoT of payments, where we always hear that washing machine ordering Tide automatically or refrigerator ordering milk. So how far are we from that kind of a use case becoming a little more prevalent than sci-fi and conference agendas?
Mm-hmm. I don't know that we're necessarily that far, but I don't know if my fridge is necessarily going to have the permissions to authorize the transaction by itself. But I think what you will see is lots of transactions queued up on your mobile device, right? Coming in as, authorize, right? One after another, you put your fingerprint down and these intelligent transactions get staged and sent. I think we're very, very close to that already because of the prevalence of the number of devices that have fingerprint, where people's banking apps or platform apps are sort of deeply ensconced in the device, and the device is being used as a trusted device to authorize payment, whether that's coming through an e-wallet that they might have or their banking app or something else. So I don't think we're too far off. I think the risk of malfeasance and misfire of your refrigerator doing it for you is pretty high. But when it comes to transportation and food and subscription services, I think we're pretty close for a lot of people. I think one of the barriers that exists, though, is still recurring debit payments, right? If you look, UPI 2.0 is now supporting debit. We've had debit announced in a few other markets as well. But outside of the card rails, it's still, we're not quite there from a standards standpoint. I think that's probably the next frontier. And once we have a bit more of that and intelligent permissioning, I think you will see a lot more expansion of digital debit as a way to drive continuous payment or intelligent payments.
Thanks. Kunsam, can you hear me?
Yes, now.
Hello. Okay, fantastic. We lost your response to a few of the questions.
I can hear you.
Yeah. So can you answer some of the questions where we could not get your comment? One was interoperability between PromptPay and PayNow. Have you started opening up the cross-border real-time payments between Thailand and Singapore?
From what we have been working with Central Bank of Thailand, we understand that they have a collaboration between PromptPay and PromptNow in Singapore. There is a commitment between Central Bank of Thailand and the MAS in Singapore to collaborate and link connect activities between these two. I think because of the COVID, it might take time for after COVID. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So it might take time a bit. I think they are in the testing period. It means that so those people in Thailand can pay in Singapore merchant, and Singapore merchants can pay into Thai merchants when they are visiting. So maybe this project will have to be last long until after COVID. So it should be happen for sure. So we have a commitment already from what I have been talking with Central Bank of Thailand.
Fantastic. So one other question which you can answer before we lose. Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear? Okay, no. Okay. So Joel, if I have to ask you a question
now.
Yeah, we need to conclude. So can you price for real-time payments, Joel? Like if there's what Francesco was saying, there's a cost to build the platform, cost to connect to the real-time clearing. So can banks and payment companies like yourself pass that cost to clients, or is it to be monetized in a different business model?
Oh no! At the moment, we absolutely are pricing it as an online payment method, the way we would do other things. In a lot of cases, much cheaper, right? Because it comes with fixed fees. It's a more efficient model, and there's good support from the regulators and the banks in making that happen. So no, I think we've seen an enormous uptake, particularly because of COVID, of RTP as a payment method in multiple different markets. So I think it is definitely priceable, and people appreciate it. I think, as Hemant said, one of the things that's not quite known yet is how to efficiently handle reversals and buyer protection scenarios. The infrastructure is not there. So that's a bit more manual and operational than it should be, but otherwise working quite smoothly, I would say.
Thank you. So Hemant, what is your vision for 2025? What innovations and what new stuff would you like to see in instant payments or real-time payments and customer convenience to transact?
Well, I think the world can actually learn from what's happening in Southeast Asia or Asia in general, especially China and India combined, which seems to be at least 5-10 years ahead of where the rest of the world, emerging world is. And for that, it's the basis is like, how deep is the mobile payment ownership, the ICT aspects of it, penetration of internet, and so on and so forth. And that's what we sort of focus on quite a bit as well. And to answer your question directly, I think the one thing I would like to sort of see is what I mentioned a few minutes ago is really the harmonization of these messaging standards and what have you across the board, where a lot of the things Sam was also trying to talk about, like cross-border flows, become a little bit easier, which right now one still has to deal with different messaging formats, and so it actually adds to the cost of processing. So a lot of that is missing right now. Ideally, cross-border payments is the piece where there are efficiencies that I'd like to see them sort of better next 4 or 5 years.
Okay, thank you. So like I said, sitting in Singapore, I've been here 20 years, but in the last 5 years, the timeline has been before Singapore Fintech Festival and after Singapore Fintech Festival. It's become like a time in Fintech evolution in the region. And since 2015, the last 5 years, we've seen the digital payments kind of get more and more pervasive, whether it's contactless because of COVID, all merchants are contactless, whether they are on QR, SGQR, whether they are on Visa PayWave or MasterPass, or they have any other wallet like a Fave or Grab or anything else, Gojek Pay to pay for it. So I believe in the next 5 years, from 2020 to 2025, payments will become even more invisible. They'll embed themselves more into user applications, whether Tesla paying for a recharge or a fridge buying its milk with an out-of-band authentication where Joel's phone will get an in-app message saying that your fridge is trying to get milk. Are you going to be in town? Or if not, then we should not approve this milk reorder request. So I believe we are at the cusp of the next evolution and creation of new business models. And I think with this vibrant ecosystem where banks, regulators, and fintech companies all work in tandem for a common goal to keep the customer payments safe, secure, and reliable, I think we are in a happy place. So with that, I'll say thank you to all of you and say stay safe and talk to you soon in person soon when times are when we can travel. Cheers.
Looking forward to that. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.